Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm Tracy Kite, and I am a JCFS staff member and a co-coordinator for JCERT, our Jewish Emergency Resilience and Response Team. And we are glad and sad to welcome you here this evening. The events of October 7th and the subsequent war and the subsequent great rise in anti-Semitism have been painful and difficult for many people. And one of the things that we learned in COVID was that it was important to be in community. And so we offer space this evening for us to be in community and to be together. We have a we have a number of things in store for you this evening. We are going to do some mindfulness. We are going to do some learning. We're going to learn about trauma as well as Jewish learning, and we're going to do some singing. So I am happy to introduce some of our presenters for the evening. Megan Lerner, who is the new director of the Kaufman Wolf Center for Trauma and Resilience at JCFS Chicago, Rabbi Joe Ozorowski, who is a chaplain extraordinaire at JCFS Chicago. That's not actually his title, but that's how I think of him. And Cantor David Berger from KAM Isaiah Israel. In addition, for this evening is my colleague Marcia Reynes, who is a grief specialist and specialist in many things. And she's available if you feel like you really just need to touch base with someone individually. You are welcome to send her a chat and she will respond and be able to connect with you. We want to make sure that everyone is aware that this is not meant to be a political space. There is lots of political conversation going on. And some of that conversation is painful and difficult for different people, but that's not our goal tonight. Tonight, we come together as the Jewish community, united in the struggles that the Jewish community is facing. And we hope that by spending this time together, by learning, by singing, everyone will find bits and pieces of comfort that can take them through the coming days. So first, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Megan Lerner, who is a wonderful teacher, and I know all of us will learn a lot from her.
Hi, there we go. Thank you so much. Leah is really on it. It is both a blessing and a sad time that we are all here together tonight. But what I wanted to do to kind of help start everybody off is talk a little bit about some tangible skills that we could practice when we are feeling overwhelmed. And I think a great way to go about doing that is to potentially practice one while we hear a bit of song from the cantor. And so I've put up on the screen a thing called 5 senses grounding. When we start to get really overwhelmed, I think what can happen, depending on sort of where we are in a variety of different spaces, there are certain things that we do that can help sort of prevent us from getting into a headspace that becomes really hard to change gears from. And so something like a 5 senses grounding, deep breathing, mindfulness, some of those lovely buzzwords that the mental health community likes to throw around are actually great options of things that you can do in a variety of different settings. And one of the things that we're going to talk about tonight is trying to find things that work for you as an individual. So some of this may speak to you and some of this may feel like it's not your thing. That doesn't mean it's right or it's wrong. The idea here is to find as many coping strategies that work for you as we go. And while this may be the only one we're going to practice together, it doesn't mean it's the only one you have access to. When we think about the idea of grounding, when we become really overwhelmed, whether it's from a memory and experience we're currently in the middle of, something that we are sort of thinking forward about and feeling potentially anxious about, One of the things that we want to do in that moment is sort of re-enter into our current space and time. And that can feel like an easier said than done task. I want to be transparent about that. But the more tangible and what we call physiological or body-based things that you can do, the easier it is to make those connections. So we're going to hear a very beautiful song momentarily. And if you can be present in the moment and listen to the song and listen to the words, you may want to read the words as that goes on. These are all ways that you can be present and experience the song as it's happening. And the idea is that when all that other chatter pops into your brain, that you're sort of letting it go by or letting it float past, and you're not looking at those individual things and giving them any more attention than you would to the song, right? We're trying to give the song the utmost of our focus and make sure that those other things are kind of passing by gently. The idea there is that, I'm of the belief that the difference between mindfulness and meditation is the absence of thoughts. Mindfulness is very carefully and choosing the thoughts that you're going to focus on and letting the others pass by without judgment. And that's the goal of this exercise as we move forward. I've given you a more traditional way that you can do a grounding technique, but you can practice all of these skills while the cantor is performing. And just again, try to be as present in the moment as possible and see sort of what works for you. Try to let that grocery list and the lunches you have to pack and the idea that tomorrow is Friday and you're getting real excited for the weekend and the what you're going to have for dessert after this is over to reward yourself for doing a hard thing. Try to let those thoughts pass by you without a ton of attention or judgment, and really trying to focus on the things on this list. There's one more thing that I'm going to say before I give it over to the cantor, and that is you'll see on here it says 3 things that you can hear that other people can hear. When we are particularly overwhelmed, stressed, taxed, a lot of times the voice we hear in our own head is not the most encouraging one. It's not necessarily cheering us on in the way that we need. And it may also be adding to a lot of that judgment that I was just talking about when those thoughts come up. So we want to make sure, and again, with the cantor's music, that's going to be a really beautiful and easy thing that we can tune into that other people can hear. But we want to make sure that we're not listening to our own internal thoughts and that we're really dialing into things in the world around us. So an example that I can give you right now is I can hear the sound of my own voice. I can hear my dog in the other room chewing on this bone I gave him to keep him quiet. And I can hear the tippy tippy taps of his little toes as he's dancing around that toy in order to, have the optimal licking experience, right? All of those things, if I'm trying to talk to you at the same time, are not being present in the moment. But if I'm sitting just focusing on putting myself back in this room, are very much opportunities to do and practice that. So we're going to let the cantor take it away. And what's going to happen is, again, just consider these as options. I think we're going to put the words up too so that you can read along, and there'll be both the English and the Hebrew version. So again, we're really thankful to welcome Cantor David Berger from Temple KAM, Isaiah, Israel. Thank you, Cantor.
Thank you so much, Megan. So, the song that we're going to sing tonight is Lu Yehi. And I actually want to just give a second of the story of Lu Yehi because not everyone knows this story, and it's an amazing one. Naomi Shemer, right, the incredible Israeli songstress who wrote the songs for every moment that Israel needed a song in her lifetime. She had actually written these words as a translation for a band who was going to record the Beatles' "Let It Be." So she had written it, and you can totally sing it exactly word for word. It works out perfectly. And her husband looked at these words and said to her, "Based these words on a translation. This is your art, and we need your melody." And then comes the Yom Kippur War, which we remember was just as sudden and shocking and unexpected. And the TV station, right, because there was only one, said, we need you to come in right now and give us the song that we all. And she hadn't written this melody yet. So actually, what she did was get in a cab and quickly write this melody between her house. Sorry, you can hear my kids in the background thinking of things you might be able to hear. Um, so she wrote this melody in the cab between her house and the TV station. So it's a melody that is born of a moment of intensity, a moment of fear, a moment of difficulty, and yet it's a melody that has accompanied us and found, for me at least, in moments of intensity and fear, an incredible moment of peace. So I'm going to share the words with you now so you can join along in with me. עוד יש מפרש לבן באופק, מול ענן שחור כבד, כל שנבקש לו יהי. ואם בחלונות הערב, אור נרות החג רועד, כל שנבקש לו יהי. Lu yehi, lu yehi, ana lu yehi, kol shenevakesh, lu yehi, lu yehi, lu yehi, ana lu yehi, kol shenevakesh, lu yehi. מה כל ענות אני שומע, כל שופר וכל תופים, כל שנבקש לו יהי. לו תשמע בתוך כל אלה, גם תפילה אחת מפי, כל שנבקש לו יהי. לו יהי, לו יהי, אנא לו יהי, כל שנבקש לו יהי. לו יהי, לו יהי, אנא לו יהי, כל שנבקש לו יהי. פתאום יזרח מאופל על ראשנו אור כוכב, כל שנבקש לו יהי. אז תן שלווה ותן גם כוח לכל אלה שנאהב, כל שנבקש לו יהי. לו יהי, לו יהי, אנא לו יהי, כל שנבקש לו יהי. לו יהי, לו יהי, אנא לו יהי, כל שנבקש לו יהי. One last time through the chorus. Lu yehi, lu yehi, ana lu yehi, kol shenevakesh lu yehi. Lu yehi, lu yehi, ana lu yehi, kol שנבקש לו יהי.
Thank you so much, Cantor. And I believe we will have another opportunity to hear from the Cantor momentarily. What we're going to do next, Tracy, did I just steal your thunder there a little bit? Okay, just double checking. What we're going to do next is I have a very small PowerPoint presentation, but I do want us to kind of go through. I think one of the things we've been getting asked a lot about over the past couple of weeks is, how should I be handling this? What should I be doing? A lot of shoulds. And so I think we're going to use this opportunity to sort of talk about how the reality of being exposed to crisis like this is that there is no right answer. And so let's talk a little bit more about sort of what some of that looks like. Leia's going to return us to our presentation. Thank you. If you can advance the slide. So when something terrible happens, I think one of the things that we as humans, we as individuals, we as people who care about other people want to do is we want to rush in and we want to offer as much support and care and kindness and what have you to as many people as we can sort of get our hands on, which is an incredible and wonderful, important part of moving through terrible, scary, sad, traumatic experiences. It increases our sense of community. It brings people together. These are all really essential parts of coping. And they're really essential parts of just being a human being, but they're sort of extra relied upon when we are exposed to something like trauma or like violence, right? We want to call on that community that we have around us, but also we as individuals oftentimes want to rush in and help those people as well. We're going to go to the next slide. When we think about the word trauma, I want us to spend just a minute talking about what that means first and foremost, because the word trauma itself doesn't really necessarily mean anything specific in the mental health community. When we think about the word trauma, we're thinking about two different things. We're thinking about a thing called trauma exposures, right? The actual event that you or events you may experience as an individual. And then we're also thinking about trauma symptoms. So for trauma exposures, we're thinking about things like the events that happened on October 7th. We're thinking about things that may have already happened in our lives prior to October 7th, right? Maybe we were in a house fire. Maybe we were a victim of a violent attack. There's sort of a wide range of things that can fall into that potential category. But when we think of the term exposure, one of the things that we know is that it needs to be life-threatening, scary, intense. When we hear those words, that doesn't usually yield a lot of jovial, light, easy feelings, right? That response we expect you to have following that is actually a relatively large response because this was scary, life-threatening, deeply concerning. And the closer you relate to the event, the more that you are both in physical and emotional proximity to that event, the more we expect there to be some sort of behavioral response that you experience following that initial exposure. Some of the things that can happen, and I'm sure everybody has experienced over the course of these past couple of weeks, a wide variety of these emotions, and you may experience more than one at the same time. You may experience more than one in the same day, but you may be sad, you may be irritable, you may be angry, cranky, crabby. Cranky, crabby is usually one we see in our teens a lot, right? You may have other difficulties like a difficult time sleeping or a hard time being away from the people that you love and care about the most. These are all things that we actually put within the range of, my least favorite word, normal, following a trauma exposure. I say normal in quotes because I don't think that anybody has a solid definition of what normal really is, right? We're thinking about it when we say the word normal, normal for you, within line of your baseline, right? We want to think about these behavioral manifestations, these responses we're having to an exposure. How far do they depart from who I am and how I typically act in my day-to-day life? The tricky thing about something like what is currently happening in Israel is that there is a constant change going on, and we sort of don't have a nice beginning, middle, and end. That does make coping with traumatic exposures significantly easier. It doesn't make coping with traumatic exposures impossible, but what it means is that you may go through those initial ups and downs more than one time. We could go to the next slide, please. I really, really, really wanted to make this slide as minimally word-based as possible because I want to drive home the absolute intended purpose of this slide. However you're responding, today, tomorrow, next week, there is no wrong way to cope. Coping is not a poll. It's not right or wrong. It's not yes or no. It's not either or. We talk a lot about this idea of the dialectic when we talk about mental health care. But what I like the most about it is that it really highlights this idea of both and. And because I am at my roots a little kid therapist, I like to talk about it like those swirl ice cream cones that you can get from the Dairy Queen, where they take the chocolate and the vanilla and they swirl them together, right? That's like when you're really out for a special treat. And you can have more than one feeling at the same time, just like you can have more than one ice cream flavor at the same time. And those feelings may be so complex that they feel like they are connected to each other. And that can make coping feel really difficult. There are certainly more healthful and helpful ways to cope in your daily life, but that doesn't mean that what you're choosing to do is right or wrong. It may mean it's what you need in that moment. The other thing that is incredibly important for us to remember is that as this goes on, in this room full of people, everybody is having a potentially different way of dealing and experiencing these events. Some people may seem like this isn't bothering them as much. Some people may feel so debilitated that they feel like they can't go to work. That sort of spectrum of coping styles is another thing that we actually do anticipate. Again, your relationship to the experience, both physically and emotionally, can certainly impact the way that you internalize and deal with a trauma exposure. But the other thing to remember is that your individual temperament, the other stuff that you've brought to the table long before you got to October 7th, 2023, all of that can impact the way that you're responding. None of that is, again, good or bad. It's all that swirl ice cream cone that makes up who we are. So we're going to go to the next slide. It's important to remember, we talk a lot about this idea of resilience, right? That we want to improve people's resilience, that we want people to be resilient, that we want to help people find their sense of resilience following a trauma exposure. And I like all of those things, right? I think resilience is a really important factor in how we move through those times of distress. But I want to clarify a little bit what I think of when we talk about the word resilience. The first thing that comes to my mind is that every single human has certain elements of their personality, of their relationships to others, of their community, of their family, of their faith, that add building blocks into their ability to build their resilience. Everybody is innately given these things, and then they are fostered and grow differently over time, in my opinion, based on experiences. So engaging things like your community, your family, your friends, putting up boundaries and saying, hey, I have that one uncle, I think we all have that one uncle, who you're like not really looking forward to the holidays with because he's going to pull out all these things that could potentially be triggering to you. Setting a few boundaries around those things, there is absolutely nothing wrong with asking for what you need and want, but engaging all of those strengths that you have, that's how we demonstrate resilience. I think the other thing that often gets confused when we talk about the idea of resilience is this idea that if you ask for help, if we seek mental health supports, if we go to groups or we look to be around others, that we aren't handling it, that we don't have something, that we are not being resilient. And I really want to dispel that myth, because asking for help is one of the most powerful forms of resilience that can exist. It does require some vulnerability. It does require you to engage potentially some of those other things that you have in place, right? Like asking a friend for a recommendation for a therapist, or reaching out to our warm line, things like that. But those are all innate and strong forms of being resilient and building your resilience. Because if you don't have something that you feel like you need, if something feels like it's missing in terms of your ability to cope, there is nothing wrong with asking for additional supports. And in fact, it's actually a great sign of your long-term success in treatment, right? We know that's going to lead to better outcomes for you because you're getting more quickly to what you need and what the concerns are. If you don't feel like you can articulate it, that's totally fine. If it feels like a sense of something, if it's that sort of, I'm dreading getting out of bed in the morning, or, I just am finding like things that I used to really love to do are just not doing it for me the way that they used to. We can work with all of that, right? That language is totally fine. We don't need you to wrap up in a bow for us what your needs are when you come to seek, if you come to seek mental health care specifically. But what we do need is just a sense of what was happening before and what is happening now that feels like it's not covering everything that you need it to. So we're going to go to the next slide, please. I have literally written this twice. I think I also moved it and didn't remove it the second time, but I've written it twice on purpose, right? Because I really do want to drive home. There is no right way to cope. And the reason that I talk about, again, this idea of two people having completely different reactions is if your reaction is what we say getting in the way of your life and functioning, if it is making it so that you can't do the things that you normally like to do or that you need to do to get through your day, that's really when we want you to engage mental health care, right? There are plenty of supports that you have in your life or that we can build upon in our community services department or in your synagogue or in a variety of different areas. But if you are really feeling like it is getting in the way of your safety, or it is getting in the way of you doing what you need to do every day, that's when we want you to reach out to us. And our next slide gives you information for how to get in contact with JCFS. I am new to JCFS. For those of you that don't know, I am going on month 2, so starting off in quite a way. But one of the things that I've come to learn over my brief tenure here is that not only are there great mental health supports that are available to everyone, and that we are really prioritizing people who are struggling to cope with experiences in regards to Israel and in the Middle East, but the other piece of this is that there is a warm line you can call to talk to an actual person within, I believe, 24 to 48 hours. There is a whole group of resources that can help you if you're feeling like you need additional, more like tangible supports. There's job supports, there's supports for children. The options are kind of endless and plentiful is what I'm coming to learn. So even if you don't necessarily have a full understanding of what you need, calling and reaching out can certainly point you in the right direction. And we have people like Anne and Tracy who sort of have this Rolodex of the programming knowledge that lives within them, that it can certainly help steer you in the right direction. I'm really appreciative of everyone's time. And if there are any, questions and things like that, we're going to break out into, or we're going to have a small group, and there can be certainly time for that as well. But feel free, if you have a specific question, to drop it in the chat, just so that we can make sure that we're addressing it. It is, again, a pleasure to be here today. And I believe, Tracy, please wink at me if I'm right, that I am going to give it back to the cantor. No, nope, I am not right. I'm going to give it back to Tracy, so that she can tell me what we're doing next.
So actually, this is our opportunity to spend some time learning with Rabbi Joe Zarowski.
I'm so sorry, Rabbi Joe. That was my bad.
Thank you very, very much. And thanks to all of you for being here this evening. It takes a lot of courage to take this time out of a busy week and a busy Thursday night before Shabbat, before a weekend, to spend time with strangers, even though it's online. But we hope we can give you some material and some thoughts and some things to strengthen you and give you at least a path and some tools that can help you through this very, very difficult period. We're feeling a lot of different things right now. Megan spoke about trauma, the impact of trauma on ourselves, our psyches, our minds, our souls. We're feeling loss and grief. Many of us have connections in Israel, very deep connections. We know people who are there. We know people who are serving there. We know people who've been hurt. I mean, personally, I have 3 of my 4 children, and 17 of my grandchildren live in Israel. So this is highly personal for me. We're also feeling some fear here as this campaign continues. We're seeing the growth of anti-Semitism in this country, which is causing also stress for many of us. It wasn't supposed to happen here, not after the Holocaust, but it is, and we're seeing it. And what do we do with it? Where do we go with it? As a rabbi, as a Jew, I would want to point out that these things are not new to us as Jews. In our long and distinguished history, we've been through this and seen it. Maybe we haven't seen it ourselves, but our ancestors have. In some of our cases, those of us who are children of Holocaust survivors, our parents or grandparents have seen it. And I want to share with you just a thought for a moment that there is actually a template for this in classic Jewish literature and Jewish experience. The classic experience of this is the Churban, the destruction of the first temple by the Babylonians 2,500 years ago. You're probably thinking, what does 2,500 years ago have to do with us? If you're a Jew, of course, it has a lot to do with us because history is not necessarily linear. It goes and it's in circles, and there are lessons we learn from the past that we take with us to the present and to the future. So the destruction of the Babylonians of the first temple is ensconced in our religious tradition. There's actually I don't want to call it a holiday. It's not a happy day. It's a sad day. It's called Tisha B'Av. It is the anniversary of that destruction, as well as the destruction of the second temple by the Romans some 500 years afterwards. That would make it between 1900 and 2000 years ago. And it's the loss of a building that was the central shrine of the Jewish people, the loss of the sense of God's presence. And in fact, there's a direct connection to Jewish observance. The period immediately following the destruction of the temple is the base for one of the stages in the Jewish observance of bereavement. Most of us know about Shiva, or if we observe it ourselves or know about it that other people do. But there's a stage that's lesser known. It's the period between the death and the funeral. Is called Aninut, or the period of shock, where we're just beginning to absorb the loss that we have sustained. And that's directly connected in many ways to the loss of the temple. I'm not going to give you the boring scholarship behind it tonight, but there is scholarship that suggests that they are definitely connected. There is actually a book of the Hebrew scriptures. It's in the Tanakh. It's called Eicha, the Book of Lamentations, which is the eyewitness account of the prophet Jeremiah to the experiences of the destruction of the temple that he witnessed. And even if you don't follow the traditional approaches, most modern scholars agree that Jeremiah actually wrote this book. There's too much internal evidence to show that he knew what he was talking about. He saw what he wrote about. And this was his experience of the destruction of the temple, as well as so much else that was out there that he witnessed and experienced. What are the themes in the book of Eicha, the book of Lamentations? Well, the Hebrew name is part of the clue. Lamentations is a lament, but the word Eicha means how or why. How could this happen? And this is the theme of the book. Part of his work is challenging God. Where was God when all this was going on? And he doesn't give an answer, of course. He even approaches God. I'll get to that in just a moment. How could this have happened? Was it something we did? Did we sin? Did we do something wrong and bring this on ourselves? Why are we experiencing this? The prophet Jeremiah notes the atrocities that he experienced, the murders and the abuse and what he saw. He also notes the hatred that the Babylonians and their allies had for our people, the exile of our people from the land, noting the fact that their home in the biblical land of Israel was no longer safe for them as Jews. If these things sound familiar, they actually are, and they're meant to be. The funny thing is, at the same time, in the same book, Jeremiah veers back and forth. He also seeks hope, looking for scraps of hope, something to hang on to during this very, very dark period. In spite of the fact that he challenges God and screams, "How could this be?" He also seeks God's presence, asking God to be with us. There's a hope for a sense of connection, a hope for a sense of community. Is there any purpose? Is there any meaning in all that we have experienced? And finally, that last verse, which if you're a synagogue goer, you'll recognize because we use it in regular synagogue services. The last verse is Hashivenu Hashem Elecha v'nashuva chadesh yamenu kikedem. If the words are familiar, if you're a synagogue goer, this is the phrase that we always use across the board, use when we take the Torah scroll back to the Ark after a Torah reading, weekday, Saturdays, Shabbos, holidays, high holidays, all the time. And why do we say this verse? The meaning of the words tells us the answer. The words in Hebrew mean return us to God, and we shall return us to God, and we shall return, renew our days as of old. We're looking to turn back, to return. We're seeking God's presence, even when God might not be there. When we're trying to find some purpose, we're not even at the Shiva stage yet, and we're still trying to find our way through this, seeking something upon which we can hang ourselves and hang on to through this difficult and dark period. Megan gave us some of the clinical ideas that can help us. These are some of the spiritual ideas, the theological ideas we can hang on to. So returning is a good thing to think about. The return of the hostages from Gaza, the returning to the feeling of a little bit of safety that we seem to have lost. The return of a sense of a little bit more peace, both here and there. And I think ultimately the return to each other and the turning towards each other, which at least in my thinking also invokes the turning of God's towards us and us toward God. May these prayers be fulfilled. May we be able to come through this with as little damage to us and to those around us as possible. And may we find a path through this.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Joe, for those words of, I don't know, hope, inspiration, comfort, familiarity. And now we are going to return to Santa Rosa, who is going to sing for us and with us.
Hi everyone. So we're gonna offer sort of our simplest and best Oseh Shalom. Right? It's a bajillion times in a service, every synagogue all over, and it's just the simplest thing. And it can be translated 1,000 ways. But here's my favorite way that I like to translate it. Maybe this is my prejudice as a musician. But may the one who is able to create harmony above, and in that I'm imagining above is this world of wild and crazy angels who are nasty to each other and have all different agendas and all sorts of blah, 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 and every angel is supposed to represent a different people. So up there is not meant to be actually such an easy place to make harmony, actually. So it's an achievement. So may the one who makes peace above teach us here below to find a way to also live in harmony, to sing a song of fellowship and of freedom and of peace. Because as it turns out, we are not good at doing this on our own. We need instruction. We need something, a model of how it is that creatures and people and all kinds of parts of the universe that seem to exist in conflict can somehow find a way to turn their dissonance into consonance together. So we're going to sing Oseh Shalom. Sing with me if you're so inclined. I'm going to go to my special way to get so you get the words. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל יושבי תבל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. I want to offer one other way to read this prayer, which is not only can God somehow find a way to teach us from the model of how peace is made above to make peace with other people, but maybe somehow shalom aleinu could be peace amongst ourselves and in our conflicted selves. And we can find shalom, peace, shlemut, a way to put all the different parts together. So maybe we sang it for the rest of Israel, for all the world. Let's sing it one more time for us. Ose shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen.
Thank you so much, Cantor. That was beautiful. Do we have one more, or is that it? Was that
That's what I brought.
okay? Nope, that's fine. I had a different list. So I want to thank everyone who's here this evening. We will continue to sort of stay and be part of a conversation. If there are people who would like to chat about what's going on for them, how they're feeling, how they're coping or not coping. We're all coping in some way, shape, or form. That is the end of our sort of planned formal session.